Welcome to another edition of Issues of Life. Man, y'all were a little feisty earlier. We got some good topics we're going to talk about today, but we also need your participation. 994-3747 or 994-0823 are the numbers that you need to dial. And or you can go to our website, truthradiofm.org. Submit your question there. You can also listen live via all in one location, just for you. Do you want to start out with the verse?
Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. You caught me by surprise there.
I know, but
think about that for a second.
Yeah. That's a good thing that I can
Proverbs 4:23. That's what we're about.
You know, I want to talk about, last week we had the primaries here, Santa Rosa, Escambia County, and you know, there was some, first off, I want to say 15% voter turnout in Santa Rosa County. 15%.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
15%.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, but we need to get out there and vote. We've got the general election coming up soon. We need more than 15%.
Certainly hope there's more than 15%.
I don't.
Goodness, is that an all-time lower? Is it lower than it's been in the past, or do you have any info on that? Or?
No, it's actually just a percentage point or higher than it's been. A little.
Really? It's higher than it's been? 15%?
Right. Yes.
You know, I think people just have it, I really think that's one of our major problems in the country. People are apathetic.
Yeah.
You know, and the people think that, you know, they don't think my vote counts. What can one vote matter? Well, didn't you tell me earlier that Hitler was elected to the
Hitler got in as Chancellor of Germany by one vote.
One vote.
One vote makes a difference.
Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. And another thing, in Escambia County, the clerk of court, I believe, he was in office since 1956. 1956.
Wow.
He's been voted in, but the voters in Escambia County said, hey, we want change. You know, the old boy system, you know, let's modernize, let's get everything going. And they sent a message. You know, they definitely sent a message. But just make sure you vote in the the general election coming up, because that's some very important issues of life that we're going to have on that ballot.
Sure.
And if you need to know who to vote for, just call us. We'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. and this election is probably the one where your vote counts the most. I mean, it's the local.
Oh, without question, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of issues to be decided then. But I was looking at the Pensacola News Journal earlier today, and it says Pensacola police officer kills suspect in shootout last night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it ties into all the other things that are happening. Like last week, they had the Family Resource...
Family Research Center.
Yes, the guy had 19 Chick-fil-A sandwiches. I don't know why, but he walked in posing as an intern, and the officer, the security guard on duty, thought it was kind of awkward, you know, and that guy had bad intent. I mean, you know.
Well, you know, this guy, the guy that he shot, Mr. Johnson, this man was he was like in many nonprofit organizations, he was a man of many hats. Security guard was just one of the things that he did, and he didn't have a gun himself. He disarmed the man that came in to shoot him. The man that shot him, after he was shot, he disarmed the man, and the man said this. After Mr. Johnson disarmed Corkins, Floyd Lee Corkins, he said, "Don't shoot me. It's not about you. It was what this place stands for." So the whole business was political. You know, his ideologies, his philosophy, and he chose to take up a gun and go into this Family Research Council's headquarters and shoot an unarmed man, basically. And this thing is just getting out of hand. It's an epidemic, and of course, and we want to get into this today in quite a lot of detail, I believe, and that's the matter of the gun control situation. Interesting to me, a couple of things are interesting to me about this particular incident. One is that the uneven scales that are used to weigh the motives of individuals. I found it interesting that that the Society for Southern, let's see, what is this?
It's Poverty Law Center.
The Southern Poverty Law Center. Is that it? Is that
Mhm.
what that is?
Yeah.
I found it interesting, their take on this, you know, because Perkins, the president of FRC, said that they should be held responsible because this individual, Corkins, worked as a volunteer at the D.C. Center for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender People. So this man, Corkins, worked at that place and then was so enraged over the matter. And you know, I think if the truth were known, there was probably a lot of motivational hate speech coming from that side of the issue to stir this man up to go take such an action.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually is the case. You know, people get all bent out of shape and people are weak-minded. You know, they take it to a degree that it's not meant to go. But nonetheless, here's what I wanted to bring out. The way that this center, this Southern Poverty Law Center, dealt with, for instance, the Sikh attack. Remember the situation where they attacked, shot some people at a Sikh temple?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Sikh, my wife asked me what Sikhs were. And probably, I would say, probably a lot of people in this country have very little awareness of the Sikh religion. The Sikh religion is one of the smallest major religions in the world. Of the 5 or 6 major religions in the world, it's the smallest. And it's birthed in India. It's in that part of the world. Now, since we're a universal society, people are coming over here and establishing temples in this country. But we heard about the attack on those people. And listen, I just want you to listen to the way that the what is that group again, what they call? Society for Poverty, Law, and Justice. What is it?
The
Help me out.
Southern Poverty Law Center.
Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay, yeah, there it is. Here's the way they describe that. Here's their opening paragraph in an article about that situation. The murderous attack on a Sikh temple in Wisconsin this past Sunday by neo-Nazi skinhead Wade Michael Page was just the latest in a series of terrorist incidents and plots by the radical right in recent months and years. It comes in the midst of explosive growth on the radical right, growth fueled by America's increasing diversity, its economic problems, now watch this, and the election of the nation's first black president. Do you see how they put that? I mean, the way they describe that. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other hand, their description of here's their opening statement of the description of the shooting at the Family Research Council. Yesterday's attack on the Family Research Council and the shooting of the security guard there was a tragedy. The Southern Poverty Law Center deplores all violence, and our thoughts are with the wounded victim, Leo Johnson, his family, and others who lived through the attack. Do you see the difference? You see the difference of how they're handling that? They put their spin on it, and their spin is very much unbalanced.
Yeah. I do have a clip over here from that the president of the Family Research Council gave to Fox News right after it happened. It was their very first statement from this guy. that was his first comments on air to anybody after the shooting.
Yeah.
So
and see these key words that everyone uses, these key words that are designed to fog up the argument so that you can't move forward. Whether it's a hate crime, you know, if you're against me, then you for hate, or whether it's racist. If you use certain key words, those words are designed to, because you can't attack the argument. So what you do is you attack the credibility of the person with which you don't agree. Whom you don't agree.
Well, they've done that quite at length, extensively. This particular group, you know, if it weren't for, I hate to use the term right-wingers, but if it weren't for people on the right, let's say, exposing the fact that Mr. Corkin had been a volunteer at the D.C. Center for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community, if somebody hadn't exposed it, nobody would ever know about it.
Is there a center for the heterosexual community? Are there any centers for the heterosexual?
Not that I know of.
Why do they need a center?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to pose that to them.
Yeah, why do they, I mean, and who's paying for that center? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, why don't y'all, those of you who are listening out there to us, want to give us a call? Tune in on this. Let's get your comments. It's 994-3747 is the number.
Or if that line is busy, 994-0823. Or you can get your comments, questions in on truthradio.fm.org.
Now, speaking of this unbalanced approach to things, this fellow, in sharp contrast, Mr. Corkins in sharp contrast to you remember back when, I forget how long ago that was, but the Swedish mass murder, when that fellow would kill all those people at a camp.
Yes.
The first thing you would never know that this fellow was involved in the lesbian gay community, but the first thing that was said of this individual, Andres Breivik, in Sweden, it was said of him, who was quickly and incorrectly identified as a fundamentalist Christian. That was one of the first things that was stated. Boy, they jumped on that right away. But yet, you'd have to dig to find out the background of this fellow, the Corkins. Yeah. Also, the same thing about Major Nigel Hassan, who shouted Allahu Akbar while killing 13 of his colleagues at Fort Hood in 2009. See, the authorities said they could not determine a motive. Well, it's pretty obvious. It was a religious-based motive. So it's a total imbalance. They're hiding, they're covering up their agenda. I believe they have an agenda myself. Now, that doesn't mean everybody involved has an agenda.
Yeah.
But I believe I believe that there's an underlying motive, and even if they don't consciously have an agenda, we know one who does, and his name is Satan. He's the great dragon. He's the God, ruler, the God of this world.
Yes. And as we segue into this topic, the idea of course, I guess it'll be time for our first break here in a couple of minutes. But the idea of this gun control issue, years ago, everyone was saying, well, we want to get rid of the assault weapons and machine guns and all the guns that the drug dealers use and all this sort of thing. Well, I've spoken to several people who advocate gun control, and they want to get rid of all guns. They don't believe that they fundamentally believe that it would be a safer world if nobody owned a gun. And the thing is if we have more stringent, even people who support some type of regulation for gun control say this, if all we do is have more stringent gun laws, the only people following those gun laws are going to be law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
The only people who follow those laws will be people who are known for following the law.
And we'll come back to this. We're going to take a quick commercial, not commercial, but a quick break, and we'll be right back with the issues of life right here on WTGF 90.5.
Yeah, a non-commercial station is not supposed to have commercials.
No, I just figured out, like, oh, man.
John, are we still going out on this?
Huh? Did I get your message? Yeah. I got it. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
John,
somebody has a comment about.
Are we still live on YouTube?
Yes.
We are. You know, watch what
Somebody has one?
Somebody has a comment on the phone, so that's why I took a break, and I wanted to come back with them.
Sure.
I wanted to figure out what.
So the YouTube people get to see behind the scenes during the commercial.
And that means you got to behave.
Hello, caller. All right, you're there? Okay, we're going to come out of the break, and then I'm going to come to you. What's your comment? Uh-huh. Okay, we'll just hang on a second, and we'll be right back with you. Okay. The caller can hear the mic. Just want to let you know.
Raining.
Yeah. We're about to come up on a minute. Let's see where this goes, and then we'll get back to what we were.
Yeah, we'll call her. Yeah, we're calling the show, so we're gonna.
All right, 1 minute. Bill and Joe were on our topic. Billy and Joe. All right. We need a real board. Okay, it's going hot. And welcome back to the Issues of Life radio broadcast right here on WTGF. As we were going to a break, we had a caller come on the line. So we're going to roll over and take that from him. Hold on a second. Let's bring him up. Caller, you're on the air. Okay.
I appreciate you not going through that long list. Well, now, caller, I think that I don't know that all Democrats believe that. We're not here to further polarize issues. That's not our purpose. Yeah. All right, so let me see if I've got things straight here on what you're saying. The main issue is deception, one of deception, and now you're moving to. Is this your second point, a matter of culture? Because you're getting them about 3 points here, and so if you would go ahead and wrap it up. I think you're making a very valid and good point there. That no doubt takes place. And I think you've made two very excellent points today. Out of deception, people get caught up in the misinformation dissemination, if you will, and so they get deceived. And then I appreciate you bringing out that part of the culture, because I don't think that we considered that in the past, and I think that is a very valid point. All right, all right, wrap it up, please. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a bit of a stretch, but I'd like to say further that I would say that it's probably on both sides of the aisle. That kind of activity doesn't just go on one side of the aisle. I'm sure it's both sides.
Yeah, the Republicans aren't always right, and the Democrats aren't always wrong. I mean,
you can't just level it like that.
Right. So thank you for your call. We appreciate it. If you'd like to get on, 994-3747 or 994-0823 will be the number for you to call. Great call.
That was an excellent call, and I think you did make two very valid points, very good points. I particularly like those 2 points of deception, because Satan comes as he's the god of this world, and he comes as an angel of light, and his primary mode of operandi is deception. And that's obvious throughout the Word of God. And so he deceives by miracle signs and wonders. He deceives by false philosophies and ideas, according to the book of Colossians, and just on and on. So a very excellent point. Thank you so much for calling in.
And it's also true that there is a lot of those sort of things that go on in Washington on both sides of the aisle, because by the time you get to office, whatever your office is, if you manage to win, then you have to repay so many favors that many times people that had the best of intentions, they were kind of like Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They had the best of intentions, but unlike Jimmy Stewart, they were corrupted. Because they have so many favors to repay. But again, we listen. When you call into our show, you don't have to necessarily agree with us.
Yeah.
But we don't want to be guilty of further polarizing, as Brother Dewey said, any issues, because the Republicans aren't always right. They're not the gleaming hope of America necessarily.
Exactly.
And the Democrats aren't always wrong.
Yeah. Let's get back on point for a minute on this matter of we were discussing guns, and gun control, and I think it's interesting that this occurred in Washington D.C. And Washington D.C. has some of the most stringent gun laws in the country, and it's pretty obvious that gun control doesn't prevent crime. Nor does it not only does it not prevent crime, it doesn't even deter. It doesn't reduce crime as either. And we're going to talk about Switzerland here before we get off the air today, and I'm amazed. I'm absolutely amazed at the crime rate in Switzerland and the gun rate in Switzerland. And I'll just leave that for a little bit later on as we discuss these things. But right now, the fact that Tony Perkins has contacted the committee in the Republican Party, and they've agreed to put language in the party's statement of principles regarding citizens carrying guns. Perkins said citizens should be able to protect themselves, and I think that we need to discuss that a little bit. I think that we need to. That to me is very important. I believe that because I've gone through a transition in my own life. I was raised with guns as a small boy. We hunted and fished and all that sort of thing. And I've owned guns ever since I was a small boy. But then I came to know the Lord in 1972. I was 21 years old. And I went a long period of time without any guns at all. I sold my guns, involved in ministry, missionary work overseas and then throughout this country. And I just never carried a gun. But several years ago, I went and purchased some guns again, and I believe that it's essential. In fact, I think Switzerland has it right. I just really believe that Switzerland has it right. Most of the crime in Switzerland is committed by visitors, people coming to their country. He says here, and I've got an article here about it's called More Guns in D.C. And more guns would mean less crime in D.C. More guns held by responsible people would mean less crime in D.C. And that's a proven fact. That is, it's been established over and over and over again. But because of the misinformation in the media, we don't understand that. These people get up and rant and rave and think that the cure for violence is to get rid of guns. That is absolutely a false premise.
You know, and it goes back to the gun control issue, you know, and felons, we were talking about this earlier before we got on air. You know, we were asking each other, do you have a gun? You know, all this kind of stuff. But then it got to the part where the law is that felons cannot have guns after they leave.
Right.
That is the law.
Right.
They can't vote either, but they can apply to the governor to establish their right to vote back. So we have all these prisoners coming out of prison, you know, but hopefully all of them are rehabilitated. They've gone through some kind of ministry program that we have out there. But, you know, Paul, what's your you know, we were talking about this earlier, and it's really good. And, you know, does a person get to rehabilitate themselves to be able to have a gun again?
Well, I am obviously not for gun control because, again, the motive of people who advocate gun control is to get rid of all guns. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that all of them have some nefarious, dark-seated purpose, but there are people who genuinely believe that is what needs to happen. So, but Nord, I mean, having said that, you know, I believe that the idea that with the concealed weapons law, if you had responsible citizens who carry guns, then there would be less crime. There seems to be at least some evidence for that. I mean, Brother Dewey just brought up Switzerland, but you know, if you're going to go down that road, I mean, any road you go down, you can open a can of worms. There is no quick fix solution.
Well, let me just dump these worms out. I believe absolutely that if responsible citizens have guns and they're responsible with those guns, there will be less crime. I believe that's a proven fact. I don't think it's speculative. I think there's so much misinformation out there that it makes it speculative.
But you have states, Brother Dewey. You have states who have the concealed weapons law in effect. You have people who carry concealed weapons, and they still have crime. They still have mass shooting.
Well, nobody says it's going to do completely away with crime, but I can guarantee you it would bring it down to just a screeching halt.
See, here's the thing with the gun issue: the people who are against gun control, and I'm against it. The people who are against it think that more guns would solve everything, and the people who are for it think that no guns would solve it. There is no quick fix solution. So
yes, there is. There is a quick. I don't know about a quick fix solution, but there's a solution to the problem.
It's not that clear cut.
I'm telling you, I believe Switzerland has it. Well, I'll tell you. But before we go to Switzerland, let's go to Texas. In Texas, I've got an article here: Texas concealed handgun carriers, law-abiding public benefactors. Governor Ann Richards, when she was in office, in 1994, Texas citizens approved a non-binding resolution asking the state to grant Texans the right to carry concealed weapons. Governor Ann Richards had vetoed such a bill prior to the vote and vowed that no such bill would pass while she was governor. You see, the other side has their agenda, and their agenda is detrimental and destructive to this country. Governor George Bush signed that law. He did sign an appropriate. He said that he would sign an appropriately structured right to carry law. That was done. That law was signed. That statement was signed into law, and they went through a period where crime reduced significantly in the state of Texas.
But there are other stats that say that it didn't reduce quite so significantly. It just depends on. It depends on. I mean, I'm not saying I'm against. I think that a responsible citizen, anybody that's not a repeat criminal and has no history of mental illness, a responsible citizen ought to be allowed to go and get a permit and carry a gun. I believe that. But it's not going to bring about some utopia where there's no crime.
I don't think anybody's suggesting a utopia. As long as we're sinners in these bodies of clay, there will never be a utopia until the Lord Jesus comes back.
You may not be suggesting a utopia, but there are people who do suggest it. There's not a quick fix solution to the mass shooting issue. It's true that several of the I have a list here. I have in the whole world since 1998 there have been over 65 mass shootings. Over 75 mass shootings in the whole world. Okay, only 14 of those mass shootings took place in other countries. Only 14 out of over 70 took place in other countries. So the United States has a significant problem in this area. We don't know why people can't diffuse their anger before they decide to go and shoot somebody. And you know, it's true and several of those shootings were stopped. Not because the shooter committed suicide, but because somebody else had a gun. So that's true, but you do have to be careful with everybody having a concealed weapon. I'm not saying
what do you mean? Why do you have to be careful?
It's just
our Constitution gives us the right to bear arms,
but not necessarily walk around with a concealed weapon.
Why not?
What's
the big deal? I mean, these mass shootings that you're talking about, they didn't come to my house. They didn't go to your house. Obviously, we're here. And so, I mean, what good's your gun going to do? You're sitting in your gun safe or your closet or your gun rack at home if you're out here in public and some crazy comes along shooting people.
But don't you have to get a separate permit to have a concealed weapon?
Of course.
Why is that?
Well, because it's concealed weapon.
Okay, but see, obviously the law sees it as a difference because you have to get a different permit. You can have a gun in your home, but you have to get a totally different permit and go through a different screening process.
I personally, you shouldn't have to. I don't even believe you should have to get a permit.
Brother Dewey, come on. Of course you should have to get a permit to carry.
You know where our permit lies? It lies in the Constitution. We have freedom. We have a right to bear arms in this country. And it should be. It is our only means of defense, ultimate defense. Not only against criminals. We're here debating this avenue of criminality and criminals shooting people, but that's not all there is to this thing.
So you want repeat offenders carrying guns?
No, I don't want repeat offenders carrying guns.
Okay, I just want you to say that on the air. I want you to say that on the air.
We've been arguing this all morning, and so I've said it on the air to suit you. All right, I've stated it on the air. I don't want repeat offenders carrying guns, and the whole idea of felons carrying guns, that's irrelevant. What's important is law-abiding citizens' ability to carry guns, and not only ability but need to carry guns.
How in the world is felonies carrying guns irrelevant? How's that irrelevant?
They don't need them. I mean, if you want to say that they shouldn't have them and ban them forever from having guns, that's fine. But to say that law-abiding citizens can't have guns is ludicrous.
Well,
it's foolish. It's absolutely. It doesn't even make it doesn't have rationale.
Again, I'm not in any way for gun control, but we do.
Sounds to me like you are.
No, I'm not. Don't say that I am because I'm not. But we have to consider that there's a whole different process for carrying a concealed weapon around with you on your person than there is for having a gun in your home. I believe a responsible, well-adjusted citizen that's not a repeat offender, has no history of mental illness, ought to be able to carry a gun at all times on their person if they so choose. I believe that. But it's not going to necessarily remedy all the problems that we're having with mass shootings.
Well, I believe this. It would drastically reduce it. How many mass shootings has there been in Switzerland?
None that I know of, especially here recently.
I wonder why. Let me. We keep referring back to Switzerland, and I'm afraid our audience doesn't have the facts here, and I've got too much information here to be able to disseminate it in this particular program. I'll tell you what. Before we get to Switzerland, do we have somebody else on the line? How about let's take a break, and we'll get to Switzerland when we come back.
Well, I want to play this Archie Bunker clip.
There you go. We
that going into the commercial
Archie
break.
Bunker.
We need to hear from somebody that's got some sense.
Yeah. It's the Issues of Life radio show right here on WTGF 90.5.
Oh, man.
John, you set me up, John.
Hey, I'm
You set
telling
me
you.
up.
He did set you up.
You made it sound like we disagree when we don't.
That's why I
He
do
did
what
that
I
on
do.
purpose.
And I played along with it for a little bit because it's good ratings.
And we are still on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I know.
All right. The tea. Man, you got water all over here. Tell you what.
That's what
Come
I'm
here,
here
man.
for. Those throws the softball.
I knew what you were doing, but I knew that it might get some. It might if we.
Softballs, I'm telling you what. All right. We don't have a whole lot of time now. I don't want to get off the air before we finish with the scriptural aspect of this thing.
Then let's do this last segment about that.
All right. Well, what I want to do is segue over from Texas to Switzerland, and then
Hello?
Yeah, but it's not,
Yes, sir.
huh?
it's not going to take you that long to cover Switzerland. Just give you what.
Yeah, the server crashed, and Cody's working on that right now. So.
He could just shorten our break.
Huh?
We don't need
Yeah, I think we don't need a full break.
All right.
He's already got it programmed in.
So we don't need a 5-minute break. Just cut the break, 2.5 maybe. Yeah. That way we'll have a little extra time.
Yeah. No problem.
To me, this is the craziest thing in the world.
All right. Welcome back to the Issues of Life radio show. Got Dewey Mars, Paul Johnson in here. And as we played that Archie Bunker clip, Pastor Rowan called and said, Archie Bunker for president. We had to interject that. If you will.
Sounds like him. All right, I want to get over to, before we finish out today, and time is flying by. I really have a lot of information here that I'd like to bring out because to me it's a very important matter. Because I keep coming back and I keep saying the same thing about misinformation. There is so much misinformation out there regarding guns that people don't have the right concept anymore. Did you know that in Geneva, Switzerland in 1993, not a single armed robbery was committed for the whole year? Not one. And the world was horrified on April 20th when 2 students used guns and bombs to murder a dozen classmates and a teacher in Milton, Colorado. The Congress is now stampeding to pass additional restrictions on the acquisition of firearms. Yet in 1996, a pederast who legally owned guns under England's strict regulations went on a rampage in which he murdered 16 children and a teacher in Dunblane, Scotland. The Parliament responded with an outright ban on all handguns and most rifles. You know, there have been no school shootings in Switzerland, but guns and kids sure do mix there. You know that every male in Switzerland is required to own and keep at home an assault rifle?
No.
Because they have an armed militia in Switzerland. And by the way, that's what our constitutional right to bear arms is all about, really. It's really and truly all about having an armed militia. Let's think back for a second to how our country was established, on the grounds upon which our country was established. It was established for freedom of religion. And that doesn't mean that I think we need to have a little bit of history lesson here. That doesn't mean that every religion in the world had the freedom to come here and get established. It was established as a Christian nation and known throughout the world as a Christian nation. We were not established as a Muslim nation or a Sikh nation or a Hindu nation. These folks are welcome in our shores, and I'm for that. Our shores welcome all peoples of all races, creeds, and religions. But this was established as a Christian nation, and that's what needs to be understood. And our right to bear arms has to do with an armed militia in order to keep there from being an oppressive government takeover. And I can assure you that could very easily take place. Let me give you something here out of this article regarding Switzerland's gun laws. In 1933, the Nazis seized power via massive search and seizure operations for firearms against communists, i.e. all political opponents. In 1938, in preparation for and during the Night of the Broken Glass, they disarmed the Jews. And when the Nazis occupied Europe in 1939-41, they proclaimed the death penalty for any person who failed to surrender all firearms within 24 hours. Now, if you don't think that could happen here in the United States, you're mistaken. It could absolutely take place right here in the shores of the United States, within our boundaries.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Well, and here's what we need. And that's where I wanted to get us to today, to talk about what are we supposed to do. You know, I think when we're here on the radio, we're talking about these matters, I'm not sure that ordinary citizens are really, they're all that concerned about these things. I don't think we really believe that this could happen. What are we supposed to do? When, you know, we're talking about hate speech. You know, the liberal agenda and those on the opposite side from what I would be on, I consider myself on the side of right, and those who are on the opposing side, I believe that they have misconstrued this whole hate speech idea. To some people, and that's not to say everyone, but to some people, hate speech is anything that disagrees with them.
Yeah.
You know, hate speech, the term hate speech ought to be pretty obvious, really. It would be generated by hate in order to cause somebody else harm. It would be an attack on somebody's character or person or a group or something for no fault of their own. But that's not the way it's used. Hate speech, you know, they say we're hate mongers and we use hate speech if we disagree with their agenda. But yet they spew out all these vile accolades and these vile statements toward Christians and anybody who disagrees with them, which ultimately results in things like Mr. Corkin did with the FRC. You know, well, how are we as Christians to react or respond to these things? First of all, when we're persecuted, when we are accused falsely, or statements are made about us, then we ought to praise the Lord because we have the opportunity to identify with Christ. Because all the accusations laid at him, you know, they accused him of everything under the sun, but he was innocent. He was the innocent Lamb of God that taketh away the sin of the world. So we have the opportunity to identify with Christ when persecution arises. Our response should be to bless our persecutors. Bless them that persecute you. Bless and curse not, according to Romans chapter 12, verse 14. And we ought to we ought never consider getting even. You know, our response to people who don't agree with us or who are against us ought be to never work to get even. Recompense no man evil for evil.
But scripturally speaking, because this is, you know, the issues of life, keep the heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. You know, as we look at these social issues from a biblical perspective, do we as believers who believe in forgiveness and grace and mercy and turning the other cheek, do we as, or ideally we should, do we as believers have the right to defend ourselves and protect our families?
Well, I'm getting to that. That's down toward my last point. I just want to give these few points here. It says we ought to bear suffering well. We ought to suffer as Christians with our mouth shut. You know, we ought not complain. We ought not try to get even. We ought to glorify God anytime we have the opportunity to suffer. We ought to work for peace. Nothing wrong with peace. As much as the Bible says, as much as lies within you, live peaceably with all men. And we ought to love sincerely. Our love ought not be a feigned love. It ought not be with dissimulation. It ought not be with that hypocrisy. It ought to be sincere. And we ought to hate evil. Nothing wrong with, if you love good, you're going to hate evil.
Yes, sir.
If you love gardening, you're going to hate weeds. You know, and that's just a fact. I mean, we ought to love good, love right, and hate evil. And then we do have a right to defend ourselves. In 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15 it says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear." That's the first line of defense. You see, the first line of defense is a good offense, and that is, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. We ought to be proclaiming God's truth to all of those around us. Anybody that asks us or accuses us, if you will, and I think that's the context here, anybody that comes at us as to why we do what we do, or why we believe what we believe, or why we act the way we do, then we have a reason. We ought to give them the reason, the hope that lies within them. It's because of Christ. And then, let me state this. Let me just say this. You know, people say, well, you know, we talk about peace on earth, and when we think about Christ, especially at Christmas time, we think about the angels from heaven singing goodwill towards men, peace on earth and goodwill towards men. Well, Jesus himself said that he didn't come to bring peace. He came to send a sword. And that a man would be against his son, a son against a father, and a daughter against a mother. So, and they'll be your enemies of your own household. So, peace is not yet. The only time there will be universal peace is when the Lord Jesus rules and reigns with a rod of iron. That means, plain and simple, there's going to be discipline. There's going to be control. There's going to be tight control, if you will, from very God himself. And so, he came to bring a sword and not peace. He said to the disciples, when he first sent them out to go to all the cities and towns of Jerusalem, in Israel, he told them not to carry a purse, not to worry about a place to sleep or eat. They would go and present themselves, and people were to take care of them. That's the way he sent those 12 out the first time. But then he changed that. Now listen to this. When he was about to be crucified, right before he was to be taken, in Luke chapter 22, he said unto them, "When I sent you without purse and scrip and shoes, lacked ye anything?" And they said nothing. Then said he unto them, "But now, he that hath a purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip. And he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say unto you, that this that is written must yet be accomplished in me. And he was reckoned among the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end." And they said, "Lord, behold, here are 2 swords." And he said unto them, "It is enough." So Jesus himself believed in the freedom and right to carry a weapon.
Now, given the fact that he said that, and then when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they came to get him, and Peter cut off a man's ear, and he said, "If you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword." Could we not deduce from that he's saying, yes, you have the right to defend yourself, but don't let that be your first response. Don't let violence, don't be overly aggressive, don't be offensive.
Absolutely.
Is that how we can reconcile those two passages?
I think absolutely we can. You know, Peter was very impetuous. Peter was, you know, he rebuked the Lord. He said the Lord was trying to tell him he was going to be crucified. And he said, "No, not so, Lord." And Jesus said to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan." So Jesus was always having to keep Peter in check. Because Peter, that was his first response, is grab up a stick or grab up a sword. Well, there's a lot of us like that today, you know. I mean, if we do have people that do have guns, their first response could be to grab up the gun first. We're supposed to use rationale.
On this note, I know a pastor, and you do too. He said he had a sign in his window of his house several years ago. He said 3 nights a week my house is guarded by Smith & Wesson. You get to guess which 3.
Well, you know, I'm glad we can't have some levity with this topic, because it is a serious topic.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
And personally, I believe it's more serious than we take.
Yes.
You know, like I say, here we are in Santa Rosa County, and there's a lot of folks around here that have guns. A lot of people that hunt. You know, we got a lot of outdoorsmen here and people that hunt, and again, I was brought up that way. I was raised that way, but I think it goes beyond just the pleasure use of guns.
Yes.
Whether you're out shooting clay pigeons or live dove, you know, whatever, or turkeys or whatever it might be, and some people take issue with that. Well, let them take issue. I think we have a right to bear arms in this country, primarily as an armed militia. And if anything, if there's any kind of control about it, then it ought to be giving every valid, sane citizen a gun and teaching them how to use it.
And just as we close, I do want to make a couple of comments. Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. He was one of our forefathers, and he said, arms discourage and keep the invader and plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as prosperity. Horrid mischief would ensue were law-abiding citizens deprived from the use of weapons. And by the way, Thomas Paine lived what he preached. He was involved in a duel and won.
It's a good thing he won.
He was involved. But also, you know, whenever the nation as a whole has begun for the last several decades, going back to primarily when they took prayer out of schools, but the nation as a whole has begun to reject God. And when you do that, God at some point will begin to pull His hand away because that's what He's been forced to do by our choices. And I'm talking about the nation as a whole. And when God takes His hand, when God begins to remove His hand from a nation, you begin to have things happen to that nation that you cannot explain.
Yeah.
You begin to have crimes that are so vile and so wretched that they cannot be explained without bringing it into the spiritual realm.
Yeah. And that is the bottom line.
Yes. And that is the nature of our show as we get ready to roll out for the day. We'll see you next week. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life.
Hey, that's right. And, of course, at the end, I've got a song for you that Tim Hawkins did. It's called The Wife's Song.
Okay.
And
speaking of next week,
defending families and stuff like that. So.
Oh. Woohoo!
Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's a great thing to end on. The Issues of Life radio show right here on WTGF 90.5.
Well, I think it went all right. Are you going to shut the camera down?